Welcome back to the second part of this Wordsworth essay. If you haven't seen the first part, please watch that first. Now, with this paragraph, this is going to be about your natural world. So, in other words, this is the antidote to what we just mentioned in the first paragraph. So, all the evils in the urban world could be treated, in Wordsworth's opinion, by the natural world. That's what I talk about in my topic sentence, as you can see. And then in my expansion sentence, again using a Heaney quote, I say how Wordsworth saw the natural world as salutary, which just means beneficial or educative. And that's how I'm going to split my two ideas. So there's two main benefits of being in nature. That's education and healing. And you'll see that's how I group my poems. Now, in terms of poems, I'm going to be using two for this paragraph as well, where I'm going to spend 1/3 on one paragraph and 2/3 on the other one, because I feel like this gives you enough room to talk about a broad range of ideas, but also in enough detail. So let's have a look at our first poem. I choose to talk about Tables Turned because it's a good poem for why the author saw nature as your teacher. Because, first of all, nature's education is presented as much more effective and meaningful compared to the barren leaves of science and art. Ironically, that just means going to school or institutionalized learning, and instead of this, he preferred to be immersed in nature. This allows him to acquire spontaneous wisdom, as I've mentioned here. And if you're wondering what this spontaneous wisdom is, the most obvious form of wisdom is the ability to appreciate nature. That is a form of wisdom because many people do not see nature as a teacher. Most people would just see nature as this inanimate thing, something that's not alive. So the ability to see the landscape, so a tree or a leaf, as, a teacher, that's a form of wisdom in his opinion. Okay, so that's the educative benefits of nature. Now we'll move on to the healing aspects of nature. For that, I'm going to be using Tintern Abbey. For this poem, I quite like the imagery here because it's very vivid and it depicts a very picturesque scene. And that's exactly what the author is trying to do. It's creating this soothing sensation in the words of the poem. And if you read just how the lines sound, it's very euphonic or very harmonious. For example, waters rolling with a soft inland murmur. It's very soft, it contains assonance, and it just flows very nicely. Now, if you compare this to some of the jarring diction in poems such as London 1802 or The World is Too Much with Us, not only is the writing very jarring when you read it out loud, but also the images are quite disgusting. So, for example, the fen of stagnant waters. And now, you don't have a fen of stagnant waters anymore, you have waters rolling with a soft inland murmur. So it's a very apparent and prominent contrast here. And what this does is it shows how nature can restore this inner peace within us and save us from being corrupted by the industrialization. So all the things we mentioned in paragraph 1, nature is preventing us from succumbing to that fate by giving us this tranquil restoration and by creating this soothing sensation. Now, for my next point, I also use Tintern, and feel free to read this because it's very similar in terms of the effect, what I say here. And basically, nature here is presented as a salvation or an anchor, a nurse, a guide, which just shows that it has a powerful healing effect on us. For example, in paragraph 1, we talked about giving our hearts away. But in this case, nature is protecting us. It's nourishing our hearts and minds with the ability to feel and to appreciate truly beautiful things. And by extension, that's returning us to that uncorrupted childhood innocence that Wordsworth really champions. So you can definitely see the healing effect of nature here. And linking this all up, we're returning to the idea of how the natural world was the antidote because it contained educative effects and healing effects. Both of these things allowed Wordsworth to overcome the limitations of industrialization and therefore acquire real education and real healing. So that's it for paragraph 2. We'll move on to the final part in the next section.